Pay attention to the security camera at the local hospital in Dumas, Arkansas, on the morning of August 27, 2006. The camera pointed toward the main entrance, but in the top corner of the frame, a small section of Highway 65 sidewalk was visible. At 6:40 in the morning, dawn finally broke. The darkness lifted, the road became clear, and investigators expected to see 17-year-old Casey Crowder walking along that sidewalk, heading toward the Exxon gas station half a mile away. Her car had run out of gas. She had called her mother at 6:13, saying she would walk to get help. She should appear on this camera any minute now. But the sidewalk remained empty. Casey Crowder never showed up. She never made it to the gas station. So where did she go? 400 yards away, another camera captured the answer. At 6:03 that morning, a white Chevrolet Silverado with distinctive door markings drove past, heading toward Casey's abandoned car. 3 minutes later, the same truck appeared again, but now it was driving noticeably faster, heading in the opposite direction. A third camera at the Dollar General store showed that same white Silverado at 6:03, speeding north on Route 65, away from town toward isolated woods. The timeline was devastating. The truck left town at 6:03. It drove toward where Casey's car sat abandoned. 3 minutes later, it returned, moving fast. Then it headed north, away from everything. But no camera ever captured Casey walking. Not the hospital camera, not the McDonald's camera. Not a single frame showed her on foot. Someone had picked her up. The cameras captured the vehicle. They captured the timeline. They captured the route. But they hadn't captured what happened inside that truck during those 3 minutes. The truck held the answer. If you're interested in true crime cases like this, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Casey Crowder was 17 years old. She lived in Watson Chapel near Pine Bluff, Arkansas. To anyone who knew her, Casey was full of life. Her mother, Melinda, described her as confident and independent, the kind of girl who knew her own mind and wasn't afraid to speak it. But Casey was also affectionate. She hugged her mom easily. She said, "I love you," without hesitation. The relationship between mother and daughter was close and warm. Casey had brothers, and while she teased them the way siblings do, she was fiercely protective of them. If anyone messed with her family, Casey would be the first to stand up and defend them. She was a high school student living a normal teenage life. She had friends, she had a boyfriend, she had dreams and plans like any other 17-year-old. But on August 26, 2006, Casey made a decision that would change everything. She told her parents she was spending the night at her best friend Brianna's house. It was a simple lie. The kind of lie teenagers tell when they want a little freedom. The truth was different. Casey wasn't going to Brianna's house. She was driving 40 miles away to the small town of Dumas. That's where her boyfriend, Adam Bigham, lived. Casey knew her father wouldn't approve of the trip, so she created the perfect cover story. Around 8 o'clock that Saturday evening, Casey hugged her mother goodbye. She promised to see her the next morning. Melinda watched her daughter drive away in the family's Dodge SUV, believing everything Casey had told her. She had no reason to doubt her daughter. She had no idea Casey was heading somewhere else entirely. That Saturday night, Casey spent time with Adam. They went to a party. They stopped at the local Sonic for food. Then, they went back to his house. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. But as dawn approached on Sunday morning, Casey started to panic. Her father worked the night shift. He would be home soon. If she wasn't back before he arrived, he would know she had lied. The whole plan would fall apart. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, Adam gave Casey money for gas. She prepared to make the 40-mile drive back home. As she was leaving, 2 of Adam's friends showed up. Their names were Jimmy and Jay. They were planning to go fishing that morning. They said quick goodbyes to Casey, and she drove off alone. It should have been a simple drive home, 40 miles, less than an hour, but Casey Crowder never made it home. Somewhere along Highway 65, near the Dumas hospital, Casey's SUV sputtered and died. The gas gauge hit empty. It was around 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, August 27th. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The town was quiet. Casey was alone on the side of the road. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. Melinda answered. The moment she heard Casey's voice, she knew something was wrong. The call came far too early. Casey wasn't supposed to be driving anywhere at 6 in the morning. She was supposed to be at Brianna's house, safe and asleep. Casey's voice was apologetic. She admitted the truth. She hadn't stayed at Brianna's. She had driven to Dumas to see Adam, and now her car had run out of gas near the local hospital. But Melinda didn't care about the lie. Not in that moment. Her daughter needed help. That was all that mattered. She told Casey she would get in the car right away and drive down with gas. 40 miles. She could be there in less than an hour. Casey refused. She was independent. She didn't want her mother to make the long drive. She told Melinda she had money. The Exxon station was only half a mile away. She could walk there, get gas, and handle it herself. She just wanted her mom to know why she would be late getting home. Melinda hesitated, but Casey insisted. She would be fine. It was a short walk. She would call again soon. That phone call happened at 6:13 in the morning. It was the last time Melinda Crowder heard her daughter's voice. Phone records would later show that Casey tried to reach out to others that morning. She called Jimmy, one of Adam's friends, 4 times. He never answered. Then, around 7:04 in the morning, Casey dialed a number but didn't complete the call. Investigators believe she may have been trying to call for help. But whatever happened in that moment stopped her from finishing the dial. After that, silence. Melinda tried calling Casey back. Once, twice, 3 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. She left messages, apologizing. She thought maybe Casey was angry that she hadn't driven down to help. Maybe her daughter was ignoring her calls. But as the morning stretched into afternoon, Melinda's worry grew. By noon, she was calling repeatedly. Still no answer. By early evening, worry had turned into fear. Something was very wrong. Melinda called her husband, Martin. Together, they made the decision to drive to Dumas immediately. They had to find their daughter. The 40-mile drive felt endless. Melinda couldn't stop crying. A mother's instinct told her something terrible had happened. She tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. They arrived in Dumas around 1 o'clock in the morning on August 28th. The small town was asleep. The streets were empty and quiet. Then they saw it. Their Dodge SUV parked near the hospital, exactly where Casey said she had run out of gas. But Casey was nowhere to be seen. Martin grabbed his phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, a police officer arrived. He began asking questions. He walked around the vehicle. Everything seemed normal. The car was locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. But the driver was missing. The officer walked half a mile down the road to the Exxon station. He spoke to every employee who had worked that morning. He showed them a photo of Casey. He asked if anyone had seen a 17-year-old girl come in for gas. None of them had. Casey Crowder never made it to that gas station. She had vanished somewhere between her car and the Exxon. Half a mile, a 10-minute walk. And in that short distance, Casey disappeared. Within hours, the Arkansas State Police and FBI agents descended on Dumas. This was no longer just a missing person case. Every minute counted. Investigators knew the statistics. The first 24 hours are the most critical. After that, the chances of finding someone alive dropped dramatically. Agents contacted every hospital within a 100-mile radius. They checked jails and police stations. They searched for any sign that Casey had been picked up, injured, or arrested. They found nothing. Melinda Crowder checked into a local hotel. She refused to leave the town. "I'm not leaving this town until I find my daughter," she told investigators. Her voice was firm. She meant every word. While search teams combed the area, detectives began looking at the people closest to Casey. In most disappearances, the victim knows their abductor. 75% of cases involve someone familiar. That meant everyone who had seen Casey that morning became a potential suspect. Adam Bigham was the boyfriend. Jimmy and Jay were his friends. They were the last people to see Casey alive. Investigators brought all 3 young men in for questioning. Their story went like this. After Casey left Adam's house around 5 in the morning, Jimmy and Jay went fishing. They drove past Casey's abandoned SUV around 7 o'clock, but didn't stop. Instead, they went to Adam's house to tell him about the car. Then they drove to the Exxon to see if Casey was there. When they didn't find her, they went back to the abandoned SUV and waited for 30 minutes. After that, they went fishing. Detectives listened carefully. Something didn't add up. If Adam's girlfriend was stranded on the side of the road, why didn't he go looking for her more urgently? Why did his friends simply go fishing while Casey was missing? The inconsistencies raised red flags. But investigators needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence. Surveillance footage from the Sonic restaurant showed Jimmy's truck driving past at 7:04 that morning. The timestamp matched his story. The truck simply passed by. Nothing suspicious, no stops, no unusual behavior. Without concrete evidence linking any of the 3 young men to Casey's disappearance, investigators couldn't make arrests. They had to let them go. The real breakthrough would come from a different source. Agents began the painstaking work of reviewing every security camera along Casey's route, frame by frame, minute by minute. Somewhere in that footage was the answer. FBI agents sat in front of computer screens for hours. They reviewed footage from every business along Highway 65. McDonald's, the hospital, Sonic, Dollar General. Every camera that might have captured something useful. The McDonald's had cameras inside the restaurant. Agents watched. Customers come and go that Sunday morning. At 6 o'clock, a girl around Casey's age walked up to the counter. For a moment, hope flickered. But when they looked closer, it wasn't her. Casey never entered that McDonald's. The hospital camera was more complicated. Before dawn, the darkness made it impossible to see pedestrians on the sidewalk. Only headlights from passing cars were visible, but at 6:40 in the morning, the sun finally rose. The road became clear. The sidewalk in the corner of the frame was now visible. Agents watched closely. If Casey had walked toward the Exxon, she would have appeared right there, but the sidewalk remained empty. Casey never showed up on that camera. Then came the Sonic footage. This was the breakthrough investigators needed. At 6:03 in the morning, a white Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck drove past. The truck had distinctive markings on its doors. It was heading toward the area where Casey's SUV sat abandoned. 3 minutes later, the same truck appeared again. But now it was driving noticeably faster, and it was heading in the opposite direction. Agents called in car dealers to help identify the vehicle. They determined it was an early 2000s model Silverado. But that created a problem. Silverados were extremely common in rural Arkansas. Finding this specific truck would be challenging. The Dollar General footage gave them more. A camera at the intersection of Route 65 and 165 captured the same white Silverado at 6:03 in the morning. It was speeding north on Route 65, away from town, toward a wooded area where nothing but trees and empty roads waited. Investigators began mapping out the timeline. It was devastating in its clarity. The driver had been at the right place at the right time to encounter Casey. Something happened during those 3 minutes, something that made the driver speed away from town toward the isolated woods. Investigators were certain. The person driving that white pickup truck had encountered Casey Crowder, and whatever happened in those 3 minutes changed everything. But they still had one major problem. They didn't know who owned the truck. This case shows how crucial surveillance footage can be. If you're finding this story as compelling as I am, please like this video and share it with someone who loves true crime. On September 2, 2006, nearly a week after Casey disappeared, a National Guard officer was patrolling a wooded area 4 miles from Dumas. The area sat off Route 65, surrounded by trees and isolation. He found a body. It was a young woman. At first, she was unidentified. Forensic specialists arrived immediately. They examined the body carefully. A piercing in the navel confirmed what everyone feared. It was Casey Crowder. When Melinda received the call, her mind refused to accept it. "No, it's not her," she insisted. "It's probably someone else. I'm sure you've got it wrong. She's got to be okay somewhere." But the evidence was undeniable. Her daughter was gone. The autopsy revealed horrifying details. Casey had been restrained. Her clothing was disheveled and torn. The cause of death was determined to be lack of oxygen. A zip tie had been used around her neck, cutting off her air supply. She had been strangled. But the injuries on Casey's body told another story. She had fought back. Despite being overpowered, despite being terrified, Casey Crowder resisted until the very end. The scratches, the bruises, the defensive wounds all proved she never stopped fighting. Forensic examiners found no evidence of completed sexual assault, but prosecutors believed that had been the intent. Casey's disheveled clothing suggested her attacker had tried, but something stopped him. Maybe it was Casey's fierce resistance. Maybe he panicked. Whatever the reason, he killed her instead. Investigators now understood what they were dealing with. This wasn't a tragic accident. This wasn't a case of someone making a terrible mistake. They were hunting a predator, someone capable of extreme violence, someone who had taken a 17-year-old girl's life without hesitation. And that person was still out there. On September 3, 2006, police made a strategic decision. They set up a checkpoint on Route 65 at the exact location where Casey's SUV had been found. They positioned officers there at 6 o'clock in the morning, the same time Casey would have been walking, the same time the white Silverado had been captured on camera, They were hoping the driver followed a routine, that he would pass through again. And then something remarkable happened. The white Chevrolet Silverado they had been searching for drove right up to the checkpoint. Officers stopped the truck. The driver was a 46-year-old man named Kenneth Osborne. He was a truck driver, a Dumas resident, a father of two. He was driving his daughter Holly to work at the nursing home that morning. According to Osborne, this was his routine every Sunday. Officers took down his information and let him go, but they now had a name, they had an address, they had their suspect. Kenneth Osborne had lived in Dumas his entire life. After his wife died, he raised two children alone. On paper, he appeared to be just another grieving widower, doing his best as a single father. Neighbors knew him as the man who waved hello every morning, the helpful guy who drove his daughter to work without fail. The next day, Osborne voluntarily came to the police station for questioning. He told detectives he was deeply disturbed by Casey's case. He mentioned repeatedly that he was a father himself. He understood how devastating this must be for the Crowder family. His demeanor was calm, cooperative, almost friendly. Then detectives noticed something. Osborne's hands were severely injured. They were covered in scratches and wounds, fresh ones. When questioned about the injuries, Osborne quickly blamed his dog. He said the animal had scratched him. Detectives asked him to walk them through his Sunday morning routine. Osborne explained that he woke his daughter Holly. They had breakfast together. Then he drove her to work in his white Silverado. After dropping her off, he returned home immediately. But when investigators pressed for specific details, Osborne's story started to fall apart. Small contradictions appeared. His timeline didn't quite match up. Then detectives confronted him with the surveillance footage. The cameras showed his truck driving north on Route 65. That was the opposite direction from his home. Osborne paused. Then he calmly explained that he had realized he was out of cigarettes. So, after dropping Holly off, he drove back to town to buy some before heading home. The problem was obvious. The footage showed Osborne's truck passing through town only twice that morning. If he had driven home, then back for cigarettes, there should have been more trips recorded. His story didn't match the evidence. Investigators also obtained his cell phone records. On the morning Casey disappeared, Osborne's phone had pinged a cell tower near where her body was later found. Not the tower closer to his home, but it still wasn't enough. Without a confession or definitive physical evidence, prosecutors couldn't press charges. Not yet. Kenneth Osborne walked out of that police station a free man. The break investigators desperately needed came from an unexpected source. A woman who worked at the nursing home with Holly Osborne contacted police. Her name was Nancy Dunn. She had information about that Sunday morning, information that would change everything. Nancy described something that had struck her as odd at the time. Every morning when Kenneth Osborne drove past her on his way to drop Holly at work, he waved hello. Every single morning without fail. It was a small gesture, a friendly acknowledgement, the kind of thing neighbors do in a small town. Except on August 27th, 2006. That morning, when Nancy waved to Kenneth Osborne, he completely ignored her. His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead. He refused to make eye contact. He didn't wave back. He didn't acknowledge her at all. That alone was unusual. But there was something else, something Nancy couldn't stop thinking about. There was a girl in the passenger seat of his truck. She was slumped against the window. Her head was down. Her body looked limp. At the time, Nancy assumed it was Holly. She thought Kenneth's daughter was sleeping during the drive to work. It seemed perfectly normal, nothing to worry about. But when Nancy arrived at the nursing home a short time later, Holly was already inside. She was awake. She was working. She hadn't been sleeping in her father's truck. The passenger in Kenneth Osborne's truck that morning hadn't been his daughter. Nancy now believed with growing certainty that the girl slumped against the window had been unconscious. And that girl had been Casey Crowder. This eyewitness testimony was exactly what prosecutors needed. They now had surveillance footage showing Osborne's truck at the right place and time. They had phone records placing his cell phone near where Casey's body was found. They had Casey's own call to her mother, confirming she was near where Osborne had been driving. And now they had a witness who saw a girl in his truck, a girl who wasn't his daughter. The pieces finally came together. Kenneth Osborne was arrested and charged with kidnapping and capital murder. The helpful neighbor, the grieving widower, the father who waved hello every morning. He was a predator, and he had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Investigators pieced together what happened that morning from forensic evidence, witness accounts, and surveillance footage. The timeline told a devastating story. Kenneth Osborne had been driving home after dropping Holly at work when he spotted Casey Crowder walking alone on Route 65. A 17-year-old girl, stranded, vulnerable, needing help. According to prosecutors, Osborne pulled over and offered assistance. He told Casey he had an empty gas can in his truck. He could give her a ride to the Exxon station to fill it up. It was only half a mile away. A quick trip. Osborne appeared genuinely helpful, trustworthy. He was exactly the kind of neighbor anyone would accept a ride from. A local man, a father, someone who understood what it was like to need help. Casey, confident but not reckless, trusted him. She got into his truck, but Kenneth Osborne never drove to the gas station. Instead, he bypassed the Exxon completely. He continued, north on Route 65, heading toward the isolated woods where nothing but trees and empty roads waited. When Casey realized something was terribly wrong, prosecutors said she demanded he stop the truck. She threatened to jump out. She tried to escape. That's when Osborne showed his true nature. He struck her, hard enough to knock her unconscious. This explained everything. Why Nancy Dunn saw a girl slumped against the window. Why Osborne refused to wave that morning. Why he drove past his normal route in such a hurry. He had an unconscious teenager in his truck. He couldn't risk anyone noticing. He took Casey into the woods. Her disheveled clothing suggested he intended to assault her, though forensic evidence indicated he never completed the act. Instead, he used a zip tie to restrain her. But Casey fought back. Despite being overpowered by a man nearly 3 times her age, she resisted with everything she had. The injuries on her body told the story of a fierce struggle. The wounds on Osborne's hands, the ones he blamed on his dog, were defensive injuries from Casey's desperate resistance. She still fought him, Melinda would later say through tears. She still fought him. In January 2008, Kenneth Osborne was convicted of capital murder in Ashley County. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors had sought the death penalty. For a brief moment, it seemed like justice had been served. But in 2009, the Arkansas Supreme Court overturned the conviction. The reason was serious. There had been errors in jury selection. And more importantly, there had been Miranda rights violations. During Osborne's interrogation on September 28, 2006, he had asked for an attorney. One was never provided. Investigators continued questioning him anyway. His confession and all interviews conducted after that request were ruled inadmissible. They could not be used in court. Osborne's defense attorney, Patrick Benka, had argued in opening statements, "There is no doubt that Casey Crowder was a beautiful girl. She did not deserve it, but Kenny didn't do it." The defense questioned whether proper police interrogation tactics had been used. The Supreme Court agreed. They ordered a new trial. For the Crowder family, the decision was devastating. It meant reliving the nightmare all over again. It meant sitting through another trial, hearing the details of Casey's death repeated in court, facing Kenneth Osborne once more. A new trial was set for August 2014, but on June 18, 2014, Kenneth Osborne accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 30 years for the murder charge and 10 years for the kidnapping charge. The sentences were to be served consecutively. That meant a total of 40 years in prison. With time already served and parole eligibility calculations, Osborne could be eligible for parole in roughly 7 years. Around 2021 or 2022, Melinda Crowder expressed relief when she heard the news. "We are very relieved today that we don't have to go through another trial," she said. "The trials are so hard on our family. We are very relieved he finally said the word guilty." But she also acknowledged the harsh reality. Without the confession, there was a real possibility Osborne could have won at the second trial. The evidence was strong, but not guaranteed. He would have just walked out in August. He would have been a free man, Melinda said. The plea deal, while not perfect, ensured Osborne would spend decades behind bars. For Melinda Crowder, the pain goes far beyond loss. The guilt is perhaps the heaviest burden she carries. "I will always regret not getting in my car right at that very moment and going and getting her," she says, tears streaming down her face even years later. "I should have done that. I shouldn't have worried about my other obligations. I should have been in my car on the way to pick her up. And that's something I can never change. I will always feel guilty about it. I will always feel like it's my fault." But it wasn't Melinda's fault. It was never her fault. The blame rests entirely with Kenneth Osborne, a man who saw a vulnerable teenager and chose evil. The Crowder family has channeled their grief into action. They hold an annual Casey Crowder softball tournament. The tournament provides scholarships to high school seniors. But a major part of it is safety awareness. Police come out and talk to young people about avoiding dangerous situations. If there's any way I could prevent anything happening to someone else's child, I want to, because it is a horrible thing for parents to have to go through, Melinda said. She also vowed to oppose Osborne's parole at every opportunity. I hope he stays in prison until he dies, she said, because I'm afraid he will. Make somebody else hurt, and I don't want to see anybody have this pain. Casey Crowder was simply a teenage girl trying to get home before her father discovered where she'd really spent the night. A girl who ran out of gas at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and encountered the wrong person. The FBI's meticulous work, reviewing hours of surveillance footage, tracking phone records, building a timeline minute by minute, ultimately brought justice. But no amount of justice can bring Casey back. No prison sentence can undo the damage Kenneth Osborne caused. This case serves as a devastating reminder of how quickly normal can transform into nightmare. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like helpful neighbors offering a ride to a stranded girl who just needed gas. The Crowder family finds what solace they can in believing Casey is now in a better place, free from the violence that ended her young life. They remember her as she truly was, confident, protective, adventurous, loved. They remember the sister who teased her brothers but would defend them fiercely. They remember the daughter who never hesitated to say, "I love you." Kenneth Osborne took 17-year-old Casey Crowder from this world. But he couldn't take her memory, her spirit, or the love her family continues to hold for her. That remains untouchable, eternal, beyond his power to destroy. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to support more respectful true crime coverage. And remember, trust your instincts, stay aware of your surroundings, and never hesitate to ask for help when you need it. Thank you for watching.